Welcome back to the Anglotopia podcast. We are childless right now, so it's time to record the podcast before we have to go get them. This week, we're going to talk about the National Trust and what it is, why it's important, and some tips to make the most of your visit to National Trust property and to basically experience probably one of our favorite aspects of travel and culture in Britain, which is the National Trust protection of the built environment.
Cake. Tea and cake and gardens. And the way things are, the very British way things ought to be.
What she said.
Yeah.
So, but first, this episode, and this is a first for the Anglotopia podcast.
Very first.
This episode is sponsored by the Royal Oak Foundation. And so we're going to talk about the Royal Oak for a few minutes, and then we'll...
And I think as Americans, how can we not talk about Royal Oak? Because they do such good work.
Yeah, I agree. And we've had a relationship with them for several years now. And we entered into a formal relationship this past year where we're doing some marketing for them to our passionate audience of Anglophiles. So part of that is they're sponsoring this episode of the podcast. And for those unfamiliar with the Royal Oak is it's the American friends, basically, of the Royal Oak Foundation or the National Trust. As Americans, we can't actually join the National Trust, and you're not supposed to. The form won't let you on their website. That may have changed, but you're not supposed to. You're supposed to join the Royal Oak Foundation, which is their American affiliate. And what they do is they partner. They're like the official partner with the National Trust in the U.S. And they fund various programs in partnership with the National Trust. Every few years they'll do a special fundraiser for specific things. Like last year they raised funds to keep Churchill at Chartwell, they raised several $1 million in funds to preserve the collection of Churchill artifacts that didn't belong to Chartwell already, so they could stay there. And a couple years ago they did a fundraiser for Knoll House and some of the restoration work it did there. So they do very important work. And in addition to that, membership in the Royal Oak has concrete benefits, and anybody can join, and it's not that expensive. The individual memberships, I believe, are under $50 a year. We have a family membership, which is like $100 a year. And then I'll get to this later, but key thing, Anglotopia readers can get 20% off your membership by subscribing using our coupon code, which is Anglo2019. And you use that to check out, and you can save 20%, and then you can get the discounted rate. Now, what does membership get you? The big benefit is by joining, you get free entry into all National Trust properties in England and Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland. So that's a huge savings, because if you've ever visited the National Trust property, it can be a little expensive to visit. Admission for 2 adults plus kids plus, can add up. And we've used this benefit a lot ourselves. I think we added it up for one of our recent trips, and we saved like 225 pounds by having a membership, not paying the admission charges. So in addition to that, though, you get discounts on subscriptions to various magazines and organizations. You can save subscribing to the Anglotopia magazine, in fact. You have to be a member to get the discount. And then you also get the quarterly National Trust print magazine, which is fun to read. And then you also get the handbook and parking pass, which I left on the desk in the other room, and I meant to have it as a prop. But it's a guide to every property that the National Trust owns, and you get free parking, which is another savings. And then one of the big things that the Royal Oak does here in the U.S. is they do a twice yearly lecture season in major cities around the U.S., where they'll bring over eminent British historians and authors, and they'll do a lecture series on usually the book they have coming out or whatever, and there's a book signing and a reception and everything. And we've gone to their to their stuff in Chicago quite a bit, and we've written about it a lot. So, and you as members, you get discounts on tickets to those. And of course, because the Royal Oak is a charity, your donation to the Royal Oak is tax deductible. So, thus endeth the commercial part of the sponsorship. So now we're just going to segue into talking about the National Trust in general. So I want to ask you a question.
Sure.
What was the first National Trust property that you've been to?
I would think probably Stourhead.
Stourhead?
Yeah.
So Stourhead's in Wiltshire. Has one of the most beautiful landscape gardens in all of Britain.
And it's beautiful year round.
It is.
We've done the gardens year round, and they're worth it.
If you're a fan of the 2005 Pride and Prejudice, the scene towards the middle of the movie in the rain in the temple, that was filmed at Stourhead.
With Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy.
Yes. Where he proclaims his love for her, but also how much he hates her. And everything about her.
Oh boy.
So
letters to Jonathan at Anglotopia.net.
So yeah, Stourhead is, yeah, that's a great place. I think that's I don't think that's the first one I've been to.
Where was your first?
I think my first was Chartwell, which was Winston Churchill's home.
Wait, you've been more than once?
Yeah.
Oh.
Remember I went when I went over for William's wedding.
Oh, okay.
I left London and took the train down and went to
It was
Chartwell.
all a new baby blur. We had a 6-week-old baby at home
Now,
that didn't sleep.
Are you telling me you didn't read the trip diaries?
Anyway.
Taking the piss.
Anyway.
So yeah, Chartwell was probably my first National Trust property. I've been there since too. I love Chartwell. It's a great place to visit.
I've never been there.
Well, we should remedy that.
Yeah.
So.
But we've been to a lot of National Trust properties. I think one of our most favorite things to do as we have visited, the length and breadth of England, or the United Kingdom, I should say, as we're working our way through, we'll have a lull in an afternoon and we'll be like driving down the motorway and go like, oh, hey, I wonder if there's any National Trust around, which basically is code for let's see something really amazing and have tea and cake.
And a reliably good lunch.
And like, just to clarify, like, I'm not a big tea and cake eater. Like, a cup of tea every once in a while is really nice, but like, and cake, like, whose birthday is it? But if I'm at a National Trust property, well, your cake. I'm scones with clotted cream and jam.
Yeah, I lay in bed at night and dream about National Trust brownies.
Yeah.
Oh, so good. And you made them once.
I did.
Following the National Trust recipe, and they were so good.
It was the most unique recipe I've ever seen. I'll have to see if I can find...
You should totally make them right now when we're done.
I should see if I can find the recipe. Like, they're made in a saucepan. Like, I've never made brownies. Like, they're made with melted butter in a saucepan. Like, I've never done a brownie recipe like that. And I'm like, it's one of those where I write a little bit about, I think in one of the magazines coming up, where I write about a British American kitchen and like trying to follow a British recipe in an American kitchen and how it's not super easy to do. But the technique is different. And in this case, the technique was very different than a traditional homemade brownie. And I kept just telling myself, like, go with it, just see what happens. And like, the smell of them baking was just like, I think you hovered outside of the oven. Like, when are those done? They were divine.
So what is the National Trust? It's a difficult thing to define because it's many things. It was founded in 1895 by a priest, a social reformer, and a lawyer. This sounds like a pub joke.
Yeah.
A priest, a social reformer, and a lawyer walk into a pub. And there was a great concern at the time that actually, we have a huge article on our website on the actual history of the trust, which I'll link to in the show notes, which will give you more details. But the idea of the National Trust actually came from America, had roots in American protection of the American landscape. And
Which we don't do a very good job, in my opinion. I mean, we
yeah.
do sometimes, but I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned.
So, but there was a huge concern that in the late Victorian era that Britain's landscape and its built heritage was in danger and being destroyed, and surely as the early 20th century progressed, it was terrible for the stately home as they became too expensive. Many were torn down or they burned down, and so there wasn't an organization to protect that heritage. And I believe Beatrix Potter played a big role in this as well, in protecting the farms in the Lake District, which if you see the movie Miss Potter, they talk about this towards the end of the movie, where there was a huge problem with outsiders coming in and buying the farms in the Lake District, and then those traditional farms were disappearing. So that was unacceptable to Beatrix Potter. So she actually bought a lot of the farms and kept them as hill farms in Cumbria. And she's like a saint in the Lake District. When you visit the Lake District, they don't care about her stories and her books. They care about what she did for the farming and the landscape in the Lake District. She's a big figure there, and a lot of those farms and properties that she bought were integral to the beginning of the National Trust. And so it took a few years to get started. And then in the early 20th century, they got the backing of the British Parliament, which said that there's a National Trust Act, which basically gave the National Trust like the force of law. And once the National Trust takes control of a property and takes ownership, it can never be sold, divested, developed. It's protected forever. And their motto is actually "Forever for Everyone," which I think is one of the most beautiful mottos that an organization like that could have, because that's really what they stand for. That Britain's built heritage is for everybody. And while some may quibble on the details of how they actually do that, like all the admission fees are so high and stuff, but the work they do is important. And they've become known for stately homes. They have over 200 historic properties and stately homes under their ownership and control, and so they've kind of become the standard bearer of protecting Britain's stately home heritage. And there's 4.24 million members. I believe it's one of the biggest charitable organizations in Britain, and it's a fantastic organization, and they don't just own houses though. Their remit is the landscape of Britain. So they own thousands of acres of the British countryside and the coastline, and it's their job to protect it, and they take it very seriously. I was really surprised when we were in Shaftesbury to see that, like, Melbury Hill, the hill that I like to climb, and it's the hill in the background of all the pictures of Gold Hill. It's owned by the National Trust. So, they even own entire villages. And actually, the National Trust is a landlord. They rent houses and cottages out to people, and you can rent cottages through the National Trust. So, it's a great organization, and it's probably one of my favorite things to do is to incorporate a National Trust property into our trips, and we've been to many lovely ones. And that's a good segue into talking about our favorites. So, what are your favorite National Trust properties that we've been to?
Well, I think like my most favorite is probably Stourhead. Okay. Because we consider Shaftesbury our second home. It's like our local National Trust property.
Yeah.
We've been there several times during different times of year. We've done the gardens different times a year, which is really incredible. You never think to do walk through a garden in the winter, but it's beautiful. Britain stays green, so I mean, aren't necessarily leaves all over the trees and stuff like that, but it's still it's gorgeous, and it's a beautiful capability brown garden. And what I think is really neat is like we've been when during the year when they have a panto going on in the house for Christmas, so it's like a really unique Christmas play that's kind of silly and.
Wasn't that?
No, we saw a panto once at Stourhead. I am certain of it. And I remember, like, it was my first, like, I'm like, what is this? Like, what? We had William with us and Mabel, and we went, like, right before Christmas. And it was, like, I thought it was so bizarre. But anyway, that's beside the point. What I really love, though, is that on a separate trip, we were given kind of a behind-the-scenes look at Stourhead. So we kind of got to go into the rooms that the general public don't normally get to go into. We got to see some of the servants' quarters, way up above the very top floors of the house, and the old wine cellar.
Yeah,
and
go in the basement and.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really cool. I've written an article about that, which is in the Anglotopia magazine.
But what I found amazing about that experience is that I think Stourhead as a house where you're able to tour is really large. It's beautiful and large and wonderful, but then like you get to see all the stuff behind the scenes, and like you can understand how one of these houses, just the house itself, not the land around it, was its own economy. I mean, because the amount of staff that you would have to employ to keep a house like that is just not necessarily even to take care of the people in the house, just to take care of the house. Like, unbelievable.
Yeah, I second that. Stourhead is the house. There are more beautiful stately homes, grander stately homes than the Stourhead house.
Wow.
But
way to throw some shade there, babe.
On the inside, it's lovely, but the real star, I think, at Stourhead is the gardens and the landscape. I mean, the house isn't even open most of the year, so people go to see the gardens, not the house.
I don't know. We've seen some amazing National Trust.
One of our new favorites, Kingston Lacey.
Oh, yes. Oh, love Kingston Lacey. They have leather wallpaper in one of the rooms. It is the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. It makes me think of that David Tennant Doctor Who episode with the piece of skin that keeps saying moisturized, which is so gross. I'm sorry. I know that's gross.
Moisturize!
Yeah, but that's what I keep thinking of. Like every time we walked through there. But confession, we've not done the gardens at Milton Keynes. Kingston Lacey. Oh my gosh, I always mix that up. It's a dyslexic in me. For some reason, those are.
Yeah, I think when we were there in the summer, we were too busy to do the gardens, and then when we were there in the winter, it was too cold.
It's really cold.
So, it
actually get a really cold, breezy day.
Admittedly, since we'd already been there, we actually primarily went for the tea and cake.
It was yummy. It was.
We were nearby.
I think that's one of my all-time most favorite memories. So when you go to a National Trust property, a lot of times you'll find the National Trust Cafe. It will be like out in the stables or kind of like not in a garden shed, but it's usually not in the house. It's somewhere on the grounds. And I remember you and I went and we were over for business, and I think it was maybe the first time or second time we had ever went without the kids. And it had been a long time since we were able to, to venture out without them. And they were at home here in the States. And we were having terrible weather, and we just decided to be very British about it. And we were just going to get on with our day, despite the rainy, drizzly, cold. And we go to the National Trust. We go down to Kingston Lacey. Thank you. My brain cannot. I don't understand.
Drink more tea.
Yeah. Anyway, so we go down there and we're like, okay, let's do lunch first because it's getting late. And we go down there and we ordered
it's New Year's Day, wasn't it?
Yes, cheese and onion jam sandwich from National Trust. Oh my God, that's like a box with a stick underneath. That's how you catch a Jackie. You put a cheese and onion sandwich, as they call it, but it's really onion jam and shredded cheddar cheese. and a cup of tea and some crisps, and you put that under there, and then I'm gonna crawl under there, and that's how you catch a Jackie. Anyway, my point is that it was so busy that day, and we had our tray of lunch and dessert, and there was nowhere to sit inside. And so we sat outside on a wooden picnic table, a really nice wooden picnic table, under a big umbrella, and we were freezing, and you could see the steam coming up from the tea, but it is by far one of my most favorite British memories. Sorry, that was a really long-winded answer.
Well, what were some more of your favorite places that we've been to?
I really liked Addingham Park. That's one that we just stumbled upon.
Yeah, we were in the
Midlands.
We were in the Midlands, and I don't. What were we? We were there for something specific, but it didn't take very long.
We went to a knit shop. Oh, and then there was an abbey ruin in the same town.
Oh yeah, it was Much Wenlock. We were near Much Wenlock, and it was still like midday, and we're like, well, we had done all the things on our itinerary, so we're like, well, what else are we gonna do? And so we just pulled up the National Trust app, which you should get.
Download the National.
It's free.
Yes, download it.
It's great. It will. Its directions will direct you to the right place, and it'll show you wherever you are what National Trust properties are nearby.
What's open,
what time, and everything. And it showed Addingham Park was open nearby, so we're like, it was like 10 miles away. So we're like, okay, that's what, an hour in British miles. So
yeah, but like we didn't. I don't know. I didn't expect anything like.
I had no contact. We had no context.
Yes.
We didn't know that it was a huge, grand country house.
It was amazing, and the
park, and there were bluebells in bloom.
It was. I can't remember. There was a movie where they shot a scene in the parlor/art room, and it's got that red satin wallpaper. Remember, it's like a lawn gallery.
Are you thinking of Petworth?
No.
The Turner movie?
Maybe.
Okay.
But it was shot at Addingham Park. Anyway, it was really beautiful, and I think that's one of the adventures of National Trust, is that you really can stumble on something amazing and grand. And
yeah, and when you visit these properties, they all kind of, you know what to expect, at least at the bigger ones. Like there will be a car park. That'll be away from the house that you'll have to walk to, so it's not in the landscape and it's not in the pictures. And then there will be an area where all the services are. They're usually in the stable block. There will be a cafe and bathrooms, and
usually a bookshop,
and a
secondhand
bookshop, and the National Trust gift shop, and oftentimes there will be a gardening center as well, because a lot of the great houses will sell the plants that they grow on site, and you can buy them and take them home.
If we lived in England,
that'd be pretty cool.
I would go nuts.
There's no way we could bring them home.
No.
To the US,
I think customs would have something to say about me bringing in a live plant.
They would put us in jail.
Yeah. What are some of your favorites? I keep talking about mine.
Well, why don't you talk about yours?
Oh, okay. Hardwick Hall, too.
Oh, that was on my list. So just talk about that one then. That was when we just visited in September. It was
pouring.
Yeah, it was our midway stop-off point between the Cotswolds and Yorkshire. And it's one of those places that I've really wanted to visit, and I'm so glad we did, because it's an incredible building.
Well, and we've seen like documentaries about it and stuff like that.
So we got a lot of context for it, so we knew what to expect. But even knowing what to expect, to see those glass windows on that building,
or the carvings in the ceilings, I mean, it was just like.
And then when you get to the long gallery, like even on a gloomy, rainy, dark day.
Yeah.
It was an amazing architectural space.
Bess is my gal, man.
Yeah, Bess of Hardwick. Yeah, she's who built Hardwick Hall. She was a formidable woman.
Like, she married up in a time when women didn't marry up.
She married up 4 times.
I know. That's like, I'm telling you, there's nothing basic about Bess. Like, she rivaled the queen. She even built herself a throne.
Yeah, she built a throne room with. She put, is it EH in the building?
I think so.
Or is it? She like had her own coat of arms and was like
Yeah.
she had power. Their rival Elizabeth, and I don't think they liked each other very much.
I would imagine not.
But she had her own little fiefdom up there
Oh, yeah.
in the Midlands.
Oh, what's the one that we went to that was kind of left in a arrested state of decay?
That is my favorite National Trust property.
Really?
Yeah, it's Caulk Abbey.
That another rainy, gloomy day.
Well, it's crazy. Like when you go, the people who owned Caulk Abbey, they were textbook decline of the aristocracy family, and they were reclusive, and a lot of people didn't even know that there was a grand house on this estate. And it was because it sounds like a weird thing to say, but when you drive down the 3 mile long driveway to get into the property, like you understand why it was so why they seemed so reclusive. It's secluded, like you wouldn't know it was there.
Like, can you imagine? I have this really funny thought of the post box all the way at the end, and you're like, "Bye, hon, I'm going to check the post," and like you start off on foot. Like that would be an all morning affair to go walk down to the end of the driveway to do the post. Obviously, that doesn't happen, but
yeah. So, but Caulk Abbey is unique in that when National Trust takes on a house, and usually the houses are donated to the National Trust by the families in lieu of death taxes, and usually they'll negotiate a deal where actually the family can usually still stay and live in an apartment in the house or on the estate somewhere, but they get everything to the National Trust and they don't have to pay death taxes on the estate. But when Caulk Abbey was given to the trust, the house was not in good condition. It had been in decline for many years. The family had been reclusive, and the rooms were just filled with the detritus of a rich family with more money than sense.
Furniture and prams and games and dollhouses
and so many taxidermies. Oh my God.
Yeah.
So many taxidermies. And so the trust, though, when they took possession of the house and they looked at it, and normally their policy is to restore and conserve and to make it as it was like in its heyday. But they thought that, okay, we've got over 200 properties now. We've got plenty of grand country houses that are conserved in their grand heyday. Why don't we do something different with this one? And why don't we use this as an example of aristocratic decline in the early 20th century? So so they decided to leave it in arrested decay. So they've left it as the family left it.
Yeah, it looks like they just turned the key,
handed over to the National Trust, and left. And
then the National Trust just basically said, "Show us your Royal Oak memberships. Come on in."
Yeah.
It is bizarre.
It's bizarre. You feel like you're walking through almost like a hoarder house.
Like the scavenger in me, I want to roll up my arms or sleeves and be like, what cool stuff is in here?
Yeah.
But it's jarring though, isn't it? Because you go through these beautiful National Trust homes and they're pristine.
Yeah, they're normally orderly and clean.
Like a beautiful thistle sitting on a chair, which means don't sit.
And everything is.
But this is there's a stack of chairs with the seat out of the middle, just in the middle of the room. You're like, okay, this must be the discarded chair room.
Yeah, and so they don't clean it like they do the other properties, but they I think they do, but they do it so that it still appears in arrested decay. And
because you would have to, wouldn't you? I mean,
yeah, because it's just going to disappear one day.
Yeah.
And so and they got the house in the 80s, and it's been like that since. And you didn't like it because you thought I thought it was speak for you, but
well, I thought it was a beautiful home, and I thought that there were I could understand leaving the belongings in a state of arrested decay, but there were structural things, it looked like.
The wallpaper's peeling off the walls. There's damp.
Serious issues with damp. I don't know.
That's mold for American.
I don't know how you stop that process. I don't know if there's a way to arrest that process, so to speak, or pause it. So, to me, it almost feels like eventually the place is going to fall down because although the National Trust is trying to care for it, I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know enough about
Well,
the process, but
like I said, they want to keep it in arrested decay. They don't want it to decay any further, but they also don't.
right.
They also don't want to. They don't want it to be pristine.
But at the same time,
It's kind of sad.
my argument is how like it's one thing to leave the contents in a kind of a quirky, funny way, but at the same time, like, how do you stop that kind of decay?
Well, and
But and it's probably completely possible, and they have specialists, and like I said, it's not my area of expertise.
yeah, I kind of agree with you, but I disagree with you. Like, I love it. I think that what they're showing there, the story they're telling of the decline of aristocracy is marvelous.
I agree with you there.
And I like that it's kind of voyeuristic to go through the house, and
That's
like
a great word to describe
yeah,
it.
it's like you kind of feel like you're sneaking through somebody's house and you don't belong there, and you know the rooms are dimly lit, and it didn't help that the day we were there it was raining and it was dark, but
Yeah.
you know the corridors are dark and like
There's no rugs down
there's no
anymore.
rugs.
Like, it's
Like
floorboards.
I wouldn't take our kids through there.
Well,
Just because, for one, I wouldn't trust them not to touch anything, and two, just because it was so dark and scary. I mean, for a kid, it would be.
yeah.
And,
Although there were a lot of kids there.
yeah, there were a lot of families walking through, a lot of annoying families walking through.
Can we earmark that thought, though? And just kind of maybe not to, like, steer you way off your script. Can we talk about etiquette in a National Trust property?
Yeah, why don't we do that when we get to the tips section?
Okay, because
Yeah.
I got some things to say about this.
So, but yeah, so Cock Abbey, it's just such an amazing place, and and when you go into the cafe, which is in the stables, there's a placard that says this is a secret hidden place, and I think that's really cool because it does feel like that when you're visiting there, and highly recommend visiting Cock Abbey.
Yeah, it's definitely a super unique experience.
Yeah. So,
What's the one we did in London too? Remember, it was it's right on the edge of the park.
oh, that's English Heritage.
Oh, sorry, never mind.
Yeah.
Strike that from the
We're
record.
not talking about English Heritage, the other heritage organization.
Not today.
We'll save that for a different podcast. English Heritage is a government thing. It's different. It's
Kind of like National
It's
Trust.
like the National Trust, but the government owns the houses instead, and they have a similar remit, but they do things a little differently. They work together. The National Trust, like Hardwick Hall. Hardwick Hall is National Trust, and the old Hardwick Hall, the ruin, which is next to Hardwick, across the street, is English Heritage. So they're very,
And how cool is Bess, though, from Hardwick Hall? Like, she built her new house, the one we toured, and then left her old one in basically her front garden as a lawn ornament. Like, how awesome is she? Like, she's my spirit animal.
So okay, we talked about Starhead.
Not to be insensitive to those who really have a spirit animal.
So we talked about Starhead. We talked about Kingston Lacey. We talked about Hardwick Hall, Cock Abbey, Ettingham Park. One I really liked that we visited on our drive was Fountains Abbey.
Which one was that?
That was the ruined abbey right after Yorkshire.
Yes.
That
was insane.
That was probably the coolest abbey ruin that we've been to so far.
Although there was a really neat one in Wales too.
Tintern Abbey, yeah, that's up there. That's not National Trust though. But yeah,
you take me to all these old great things, and I just look at it like, this is really cool. I don't necessarily pay attention to the name on the door, which would be relevant for this conversation.
Well, it's run by I don't know how to pronounce it because it's in Welsh, but it's the Welsh equivalent of English Heritage.
Okay. Anyway.
So, yeah, Fountains Abbey was incredible. It's definitely a much more complete abbey ruin than Tintern or similar places. So, like the tower is still there, and then there was the cloisters, that long avenue of. It's a amazing place, and I've never met a abbey ruin I didn't like. I like abbey ruins a lot.
I want to share something here, though, that is super cool about being a Royal Oak member. And they did not ask me to share this story, so this is So, as Royal Oak members, when you go into a National Trust property, you just show your Royal Oak card and you
Yeah.
get entry. You get, it's not free because you technically have a membership, but it's like free entry, and which is great. Oops, sorry, the dog knocked the camera. So somehow I misplaced my Royal Oak card, and we knew that we had National Trust properties on the schedule, and I said to John, I'm like, no big deal. We'll just pay for me. Like, it goes towards a good cause. And then, excuse me, we went to go to the Abbey, and I remember the admissions fee. It was like £20 or something. It was one of the more expensive places. It was like, oh my gosh. And John had sent an email to Royal Oak like earlier that morning.
I sent the email after our visit there.
No, because that's right. Sent it after. But like I literally had my Royal Oak, like a copy of my Royal Oak card on my phone within 6 hours. I mean, they were super fast.
Yeah, they wouldn't let you in on my card.
Yeah.
So you had to pay for you to get in.
Which is fine. It goes towards a good cause.
Yeah, it's fine. And then they sent us.
Yep.
And they sent us a replacement card right away.
Yep, which was amazing. So keep that in mind. If you end up like me in England and you've forgotten your Royal Oak card, you can always reach out, and they're more than happy to help you, and their service is prompt, and that's amazing.
There's a private information on this. This is my Royal Oak card.
You can see it's well loved and worn.
As you can see, it's battle hardened, and you just show that when you go, and they scan it and let you in. Mm-hmm. When we first started going with our Royal Oak card, like a decade ago, there was lots of confusion as to what this even was. A lot of places weren't familiar with it, and
they'd have to read the back.
They'd have to read the back of it,
or call somebody.
And look it up, but they've gotten the memo now. Now we've not had any issues using it in the last 5 years.
As long as it's present with you.
As long as you have it.
Which is fair.
I would say my second favorite National Trust property is Chartwell, which is Winston Churchill's home, and which is in Kent that I mentioned earlier. Chartwell was a very important place for Churchill. It was like his vision of English countryside in Italy, and it has views of the Wheel of Kent, and it was his daily inspiration. And the house is pretty much as he left it when he died, and they've kept it that way. And sorry, I forgot my thought process there.
That's okay.
But it's a beautiful place, beautiful landscape that he shaped himself. And if you look at the paintings he painted of it, it looks like it was when he painted it. His artist studio was there, where there's dozens of his paintings hanging up, and you can see his easel there as if he was going to walk right back in and paint. It's easy to get to from London. They don't do guided tours of it. You have to. It's like a self-guided tour through the house. But I had a guided tour last year when I was there for the Oxford thing. I got a behind-the-scenes tour, and I actually got to see his bedroom, his private bedroom, which is usually closed off to the public. So that was a special treat. The perks of being in the press. But it's just such a beautiful place, and it's not when you compare it to other stately homes, it's not a grand country house. It's a very modest country house, but it drained Churchill's finances to the ends of his days, just because he wanted things a certain way. And after World War II, his finances weren't in great shape, and he was going to be forced to sell it. And his rich friends and benefactors thought this was unacceptable, so that the hero of World War II would have to lose his beloved country house. So they all banded together to buy the house from him so they could have the cash flow, and then the consortium that bought it donated it to the National Trust on the proviso that the family could live there until, I believe, Clementine died, so in the 70s. So then after that, they opened it up to the public. and it's very much his private, personal home. I highly recommend visiting. It's a lovely place. So I think we've talked enough about specific properties. There are hundreds. We will spend our lifetime going to them all. You're like, oh, great.
It's a lot of tea and cake, which means now you have to walk the garden because it's a lot of tea and cake.
So, but now I thought we would go through some tips and tricks for making the most of your visit. And there's an article on the site that I'll link to where we've talked about some of these before. But why don't we lead with you talking about the etiquette part, because that's your bugbear.
Okay. So I guess let me preface this by saying that did you get the sugary bit
No,
at the bottom?
it's cold.
Oh.
This mug did not keep my tea cold or hot.
Okay. So let me start by saying that although these homes are in the hands of the National Trust and they're cared for lovingly, I always try and approach a National Trust property as this was somebody's home. Like, you're walking through somebody's home. So
It's not a museum.
well, it has that aspect where it feels like it is, but people lived here. Like, the building you're walking through was somebody's dream, or the dream of a couple generations to make the house what it is. So that being said, like, there are a couple of things that I see other tourists, primarily other Americans, and not to pick on my own, but like, if
Address
somebody
your
would
letters
just say,
to Jackie
okay,
at
fair
Anglotopia.net.
fair enough, I will take those letters. So, like, if it's muddy outside or it's like really, really wet, more often than not, there's like a spot to wipe your feet before you go in the door. Wipe your feet.
And often they'll give you a cover for your umbrella, or you have to check it.
Yeah, right, because you don't want a drippy umbrella going through the house. It's fine. Sometimes we even went to one house where they gave us booties, remember? Mm-hmm. Like booties, like these little plastic.
It was Kingston Lacey, actually.
I think it was. Like these little booties that went over our shoes so that we didn't track through the house. Even though we had, done our best to keep our shoes clean before we came in. It just, the British mud, sometimes it can't be helped. But some other things to keep in mind. Some of the National Trust properties, the way that the tours are set up through the house, it can be narrow going through, like, and granted, everybody wants to stop and everybody wants to look in the room, but just be mindful that there are other people, especially as somebody who's really short. Like, if there's a wall of people that are like, I don't know, average height, I can't see at all. And I'm fine to wait my turn to see, but just be mindful that everybody wants to see. And I'm not just saying this as a short person, I'm just saying in general. And then I think my biggest, and this is where I primarily speak to my fellow countrymen, one of the things that just makes me crazy when we encounter other Americans at a National Trust property, particularly in a home, is they're so loud. So loud. Funny anecdote, when we went through Hardwick Hall, there was another American couple going through at the time, and they must have been having a row about something.
That was awkward.
They weren't necessarily fighting, like, it wasn't an active fight at this point.
It was years of simmering resentment.
It was passive, but, like, one would storm in one room and the other would storm out, and then, like, I happened to be down in the kitchens, which is my favorite part of a National Trust property. Kitchens or nursery, like, those are my two favorite. And so I happened to be in the kitchen, and, like, one of the parties was already in the kitchen, and the second party came into the kitchen, and, like, it went off. And I was just like, and I hadn't opened my mouth. They didn't know if I was British, if I was European, if I was American, and the American in me to another American wanted to be like, can you guys take it outside? Like, seriously?
Go do it in the car park, like a normal American.
Like, I was appalled and stunned and embarrassed, and the guy ended up storming out of the house. And I'm thinking, yeah, you've just slammed a 300-year-old door. Like, I don't know. It makes me crazy. Like, remember, you're in somebody's home. Like,
it's a place of historical significance. Treat it nicely and kindly.
Exactly.
There will be places to sit, and as we mentioned earlier,
Oh,
if there's a
yeah.
little thistle in the chair, don't sit,
Or a ribbon
or a ribbon. You
across.
can't sit in that chair.
Just another
Yeah.
piece of etiquette, rule of thumb. Always ask before
Yeah.
you sit.
Stay out of the 300-year-old Chippendale chair.
Yes.
So,
And last etiquette thing. Last, I promise. I will get off my soapbox about this. Don't touch anything.
yeah.
Like, just because there might not be a rope around it does not mean that you are allowed to touch it. Like, I'll speak for myself here. I would never go into a stranger's home and start touching all their stuff because it's super old and super cool. Like, don't touch.
Boundaries.
Like I don't understand why people like this common sense stuff just doesn't apply when you get into a National Trust property. It makes me crazy. Anyway,
so some tips for making the most of your visit to a National Trust property. Number 1, join the Royal Oak Foundation if you're an American. I think Canadians can join as well. You might also have an organization in Canada you can join. But join the Royal Oak. You will get free entry. You get the parking disc. You get the discounts on various National Trustee things.
Would that be the Royal Maple? I'm kidding. I don't know if that's what it is.
But,
that's lighthearted and meant in good spirit.
I was wrong earlier in quoting the membership prices. I apologize, Royal Oak. An individual membership is $80. Subtract 15% if you use our code.
You will make that money.
Yeah.
3 or 4 properties, you're done. You've paid for it's paid for itself.
And then if you use our discount, 1.5 divided by 80, you save like $18 on the membership. So like it's like $60 out of 80. So you save a lot of money there. If you can get a dual family membership, which is two members. It's 125, and I think that's what we have. Again, subtract 15%. So what? That's 15.
And it goes up from there.
Yeah, I did my math wrong before, didn't I?
Yeah.
We met remedial math. If you listen to the original podcast.
Yikes.
So yeah, just don't listen to my math here. But you can save 15% on 125.
Well, how about we just send them to the Royal Oaks website?
It's royal-oak.org, and then we'll obviously put the link in the show notes.
Yeah. But tips: do a little research before you go.
Family membership is $150.
Okay.
That's worth it if you've got kids.
Agreed, but they can go there.
And then,
yeah, I was just talking about the tips.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Do a little research before you go. It's a really good idea to bring a coat, maybe bring a pair of wellies or rubber rain boots, or I hate to say it, a pair of tennis shoes, depending on where you're going. Because if they have gardens, the gardens are almost always, without a doubt, worth it. Yeah. And you want to be well equipped when you go.
That picking up on what she said, get the app because you need to check the opening and closing times because every property is different.
And they adhere to them strictly.
That and the houses usually have different opening and closing times than the rest of the property. Yeah. So like a lot of times like the houses don't open till like 11 or 12 and they're only open for like 3 or 4 hours and then they close them. But the rest of the gardens will be open all day. So if it's
the calf.
So if it's important to you to see the house, you need to make sure that the house is going to be open. And then a lot of they run them. Each one of them is kind of different too on how they run admission into the house. Some will work on a timed entry system where you tell them you want to go in the house when you go in, and they'll give you a time ticket in a lot of time slot you can go in. Some you can just wander in and wander out at will. Some only do guided tours. So that's information you need to get from the app or from the box office when you're there.
Yeah, definitely you want to do some research.
Yeah, because you want to make sure you make the most of your visit. Like, for example, if you're going to visit Chartwell, that's a house you can wander around in, but it's timed entry. So you can only go in your allotted time, and oftentimes they will sell out. It's free, but they will sell out of timed entry passes.
Well, yeah, you only want so many people through the house at a time.
So you need to book those ahead.
Yes.
Like so like a hugely popular property like Chartwell or Stourhead, book that ahead online or in the app, so that when you get there you're not disappointed, because it would suck to get all the way to Chartwell, because
Yeah.
it's a lot to get there, and then you not be able to go in the house like that. The gardens are beautiful and there's a nice cafe and a great gift shop, but to not go in the house would suck.
I don't think we've ever run into that situation, but I think we've also been very lucky.
Yeah, well, we travel in the bumper season, and
This is true.
usually we're
Yeah,
there
if you
on
go
weekdays, so there's
June
not
or
crowds.
July,
Yeah,
good luck.
so that's critical. Like you said, always do the gardens. Most of the properties will have a landscaped garden of some kind, and just have a wander around.
They are gorgeous, and they're meant to be walked.
Yeah, usually they'll give you a map when you go in that will give you all the walking paths around the property. If you have the ordnance survey map of the area, you can see the walking trails in the greater area, and a lot of times you can do a several mile walk if you are so inclined.
The right to roam in England.
And you can have the right to roam on the footpaths. I like to always get the house guidebook.
You do.
Every time I visit a property, it's usually 3 or 4 or 5 pounds in the gift shop. I always get the house guidebook because, personally, even if I wasn't going to be writing about these places, I would buy it anyway just to have it, to have research and have it be a reference. But
and because you go through and it's hard to see everything.
Yeah, and it's hard to see everything, and it's difficult to get context unless you're on a guided tour. So the guidebook really is a great distillation of everything you want to know or need to know about the place. And then from my perspective, I use it for research when I do the writing later.
I've got another one. Most National Trust properties are really family friendly.
Yeah.
So we joke about not wanting to take our kids to Calk Abbey, and maybe that's the one where we'd have a second guess, just knowing the personalities of our children. But these houses are really meant for the British public and for those who want to see the houses. I will say, you cannot bring a stroller or pushchair or pram through these houses.
Yeah,
that's
you usually
something.
have to park it outside.
Or they'll let you park it in the foyer if it's raining. But you cannot take it through the house, which makes sense. There's not an elevator. So if you are going to be traveling with small children that can maybe still go in a carrier, I think it was maybe it was Stourhead where I wore one on the front and one on the back.
No, I wore one.
Oh, okay, right. 6 months and 2 years, so we could still wear them, but
yeah, and most of the properties, they're designed for families to have a day out.
yes,
There's always a playground.
almost always
There's an area for the children to play, and
family friendly food.
There's always family friendly food in the cafe, and our strategy when we went, I think we took turns going in the houses, so one of us
That's a really good one.
Yeah, one would stay with the kids while.
Yes. So if your children are rambunctious and full of wonderment to the point where you're going, maybe I don't want to take them through, or they're not, maybe they're just not old enough to really get what is going on, by all means, go find a really sunny, pretty spot in the garden and let them run around like crazy, and then switch off, and it's great. Or because they're very family friendly places, they can go get an ice lolly or an ice cream. It's a nice thing to do. And so if your kids your kids don't have to be super old to go through. I think it's same. Conquer and Divide. Ours are 5 and 7 right now. Yeah, we would walk them.
I think I would take them through now.
I think they would be blown away.
We would struggle with Will, I think, but I think Mabel would love it.
Oh, for sure.
And a lot of the houses, they've set up programs to appeal to children. When I was at Kipling's house in Kent, or West Sussex, forgive me if I said we're the wrong location. They had little knitted mice positioned all over the house, and the children are tasked with finding all the little mice.
Jane Austen's house
had the soldiers.
Had the little, they call it Skittles. Yeah. It's almost like bowling, I think. And so these little wooden soldiers, and so you had to find all the little wooden soldiers in each room. And Will was 2, but he loved it. And he got a stamp or a sticker or something at the end. but he kept him engaged, like, so we could
Oh,
keep going through the rooms.
can you imagine taking him down in one of those houses with all the interesting light bulbs?
Oh, he would go crazy. He would love that.
For context, our son's obsessed with light bulbs and electrical things. That's his thing. So he would just love all the light bulbs in his daily home.
He would, and like the wiring. A lot of these homes are so old that the wiring isn't in the wall.
Yeah, it's just over the wall.
Yeah, I mean, because what do you do with the stone wall? Like, you can't.
And then oftentimes there'll be an area for kids with the costumes. They can put on the costumes and take pictures. And
that's really fun.
so it's, and then there's the paths to go for a walk, and there's plenty for families to do. And a lot of families, what they'll do is, British families, is they'll spend the day there.
And picnic.
And do lunch and do the house, do the gardens, go for a walk. And
But for those who maybe don't want to try the cafe or have dietary restrictions.
You can bring your own food.
You can bring your own food. And I mean, I probably wouldn't sit in the cafe and eat it, but I think you could find a nice spot in the garden or a bench to sit and eat it.
Another tip, most of the bigger ones usually have a bookshop, and these are secondhand bookstores run for the benefit of the property. All the proceeds go to it, and people just donate their books, and it's usually like in a shed or in a room or off to the side in the stables.
It's never in the house.
It's never in the house. It's kind of out of the way. It's usually on the map they give you. And
somewhere out in the garden. It's literally a shed out in the garden somewhere.
And what's amazing about these things is they're honesty bookshops. There's no till or person in there monitoring the store. You just wander in, you find a book you want. It says what the price is.
Usually it's like £2.
It's like £2 for a hardcover, £1 for a paperback, and there's a little metal box that you deposit your money in, and like they just trust that people are going to be honest. I think that's great.
I do too.
Tips. We did the Gardens guidebook, Join the Royal Oak, room guides for houses where there's not a guided tour aspect. There's always a volunteer in each room at a National Trust property.
Well, maybe not each room, but usually within the vicinity.
In the vicinity, their job is to obviously watch everybody, make sure they don't touch anything, but also they're usually retired people who are happy to talk to anybody about their specific room and everything that's in it. Sometimes the trick is to get them to stop talking, but they will be happy to tell you everything you want to know about the room you're in.
And the knowledge that some of these people, like, it's not, they take their roles very seriously. Yeah. And so I think that there have been times where I have learned more about a particular room or a piece in a house from the guide than the guidebook.
And most rooms will have like a printout that has an inventory of everything important in the room, but that's very
and it does come in several different languages.
It's very detached from the space, so it's nice to get that warm person talking.
Well, it's almost like it kind of goes back to it being a home. It's that person obviously doesn't live there, but you could imagine them almost being like a staff member of the house.
What's funny is when I was in the Lake District, I went to Muncaster Castle, which is not National Trust, but it's open to the public, and I was in a room, and it was a library. It's the most beautiful octagonal library, Victorian octagonal library, grand 2-story space.
It makes me think of the Disney version of Beauty and the Beast.
I had
kind of library.
I had inappropriate thoughts about that library.
Oh.
It was a beautiful library.
He's kidding, folks. He's completely kidding.
I'm kidding. There was a man sitting at the desk reading a book, and I'm like, did I just stumble on like the Lord of the Manor here reading in his library? Like I felt a little uncomfortable being in there then, because I'm like, should I even be in here? But it turned out he had a little volunteer placard on.
Oh, I was gonna say
he had a little volunteer placard. He was just a volunteer reading in the library, and he had no interest in talking to any of the visitors in the library.
Which is that's cool.
So
those books need to get aired out.
Yeah, like with bigger properties, you can spend the whole day there.
Easy.
And I'll be honest, like we pack our itineraries and have to do things fast. So we try to put several in a day when we're really pushing, but when we stay in Dorset and kind of chillax, to use a horrible word, when we relax, we'll just allocate the whole day to doing one. and
Yeah.
it's nice. And that's the only thing we're gonna do that day. And you can easily do that. And then some smaller properties, like you can do in an hour.
Easy.
You know, you pull up, see the place, and you've seen
Hardy's
everything.
Place. Remember with the walk through the woods?
Yeah, that was wonderful. Oh, we didn't talk about that one. Oh, I should talk about that one.
Yeah, well, we can talk about it right now.
Well, yeah. Well, the Hardy Cottage in Dorset is where he grew up and where he wrote a couple of his books before he moved out to his house in Dorchester. It's a beautiful thatch cottage, and
it's idyllic. I mean, it is like
it's literally you open a Hardy book and like and you hold up the Hardy book. It's exactly what you would imagine it would look like. I mean,
but what's really unique about that property is that you literally have this really beautiful trail through the woods.
And that's new actually.
It is fantastic.
Yeah, the National Trust built a new visitor center in partnership with the local
council,
I don't know who, and so they because there weren't visitor facilities there, but so they wanted to have that National Trust experience, but the National Trust couldn't pay for it, so they all did. A bunch of people partnered together.
Ironically, we pulled up and the visitor center was closing. It was
closing, but the house was still open for another hour.
Yeah, so they were like, and it's a little bit of a walk. So
yeah,
for those of you with mobility issues, I am sure that there is another way around.
Yeah, there's another parking area for people with
because you could not do the wood, and it was funny because they were like,
"Is this walk ever going to end?"
They were like, "You better keep a nice pace, like if you want time to go through the house." And so, like, here we are hoofing it through this beautiful wood, which it's on us. I think we didn't even plan to do it. I think it was one of those, like...
We added on at the end of the day.
Like, oh, hey, it's right there. Why don't we go do this?
The weather was beautiful.
Oh, the weather was gorgeous.
It was
gorgeous.
Yeah.
We made it in time. Both, like... out of breath, like feeling all gross.
Well, and we had it to ourselves.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Because it was just about the clothes, but it's a small cottage. Like, there's not much to see. You just walk through and then you're done, and then you take pictures of the garden and the cottage.
Like, granted, we went in a bumper time.
Yeah,
we were probably the last
this was
entry.
In April, so yeah.
You know, but keeping that in mind, could you imagine like going in July?
Yeah.
Trying to get into this teeny tiny little cottage. Well, it's not that teeny.
And then that's
tiny.
probably a situation where they have a timed entry system where they limit who can go in. So
and then the wood walk makes sense because it slows the flow of traffic. Yeah.
They think about these things, don't they? So anyway. Yeah, so I think that's it for tips. I'll link to the article we have in our archive that has more detail on that. Maybe actually I'll add a few now that we've talked about it. And I think that's a good moment to wrap up. So thank you to Royal Oak for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. In case you missed it at the beginning.
And can I just say thank you to Royal Oak for partnering with National Trust for all the good work you do. I mean, I know that you had hit on it earlier too about Royal Oak doing a lecture series here in the U.S.
So let's talk about that.
The lecture series, you know that when the Royal Oak brings a lecturer to review a book or a subject, you know you're getting the very best of the very best in Britishness and experts in the field. We have sat through so many fantastic lectures. We met Lucy Worsley at one when her last book or maybe
several books ago,
probably.
It was a few years ago.
It was delightful in person, by the way.
That's
great.
That was something I was supposed to mention, so thank you for bringing that up.
You're welcome.
They've just released their spring lecture schedule, and we're going to have an article on the site later in the week about that. But they've got lectures scheduled for Atlanta, Boston, Charleston, Chicago, L.A., New York, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., La Jolla, California, San Francisco, and Winterthur. I don't know where that is.
In Delaware.
Okay. Yeah. So, like, to give you an example, the two Chicago lectures are Adrian Tenniswood, who's a famous British historian and author. He has a new book out called Behind the Throne, A Domestic History of the Royal Household.
We're going to that.
Yeah, I have the book. It's a wonderful book. And he's a renowned historian. So that's something we're definitely going to go to. That's in April. It's April 16th. So if you're in Chicago, come see this.
It's at the beautiful Newberry Library, that one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is a Chicago institution
They
in
just
itself.
renovated it. It's really nice now. You should,
It's beautiful.
I hope they have they have a new exhibition on about the exhibition they had down on the south side in Hyde Park.
The World's Fair?
The World's Fair, yeah. They have a huge exhibition on the World's Fair now.
Ooh.
All kinds of historical documents. It's really cool.
Oh, I want to go.
So anyway, and then the other one is A Sense of Harmony, Gardens in the Arts and Crafts Movement with Judith Tankard, another garden historian and author. That's at the Chicago Architecture Center. So
Which is also another really great spot to hear a lecture.
Yeah, that's May 8th. So they're usually in April and May. They've got David Cannadine, who's an eminent British historian. He's coming to New York to talk about Winston Churchill's paintings. So they're doing a lot of great lectures this year.
Maybe we'll go to that one.
In New York.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, we're not that far. We're Chicago. I mean, that's under an hour flight.
It's 2 hours. I looked.
Oh, okay. Ah, busted!
We have a travel moratorium in 2019. Maybe we can use our miles and go for free, right?
There you go. Now you're thinking.
So we've worked with Royal Oak for several years now, and their sponsorship of Anglotopia has been a key part of our success in the last year. So we're grateful to be working with them. So thank you, Royal Oak, and thank you for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. And with that, we will leave it, and we hope you've enjoyed this look at the National Trust, and we'll see you next week.
You can go warm up that tea now.
Yeah, right. I have to make a new cup. It's good. I'm starting to flag. So
thank you.
Have a great night.